someone sent me this. It was a panel on CNN, and they were discussing Donald Trump questioning Kamala Harris's race. And it was a panel discussion. And they said, can you please comment on this? Now, people send me a lot of things. I don't get to comment on everything. But I saw this one and I said, I should probably comment on this. So the question comes back into the room about whether or not Kamala Harris is a Black American. And I want to explain to people what that really means, because people have to understand that Black Americans are an ethnic group. So when you hear people, particularly those online, a lot of this is online, when you hear people online say she is not Black, that is what they are referring to. Let's get into this panel here. And I'm going to show you something that an author who's been talking about this for years, way before many of us even heard of Kamala Harris, something that she wrote many years ago. Let's get into it.
Donald Trump's attempt to wrestle back the election spotlight this week may have succeeded, but not in the way some of his allies hoped. The former president, trying to appeal to religious and Black voters, seemed to fall back to his default setting of divide and try to conquer.
Do you believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is only on the ticket because she is a Black woman?
She was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was Black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn Black, and now she wants to be known as Black.
Donald Trump, who's made a concerted effort to reach out to Black voters, questioning the vice president's racial identity during an appearance before Black journalists.
So I don't know, is she Indian or is she Black?
It doesn't seem to have been a mistake. At a rally hours later, the campaign displayed this headline: watch Kamala Harris sworn in as first Indian American senator.
Everything about Kamala Harris roll out, it's phony and it's fake.
Earlier in the week, Trump's focus was on religion.
My beautiful Christians, I love you. You gotta get out and vote.
Urging key voting blocs to support him while also attacking Harris.
She doesn't like Jewish people. She doesn't like Israel.
Harris's husband is Jewish, but that didn't stop Trump.
How does a Jewish person vote for a Democrat? How does a Catholic person vote for a Democrat?
Kristen, why is Trump questioning Kamala Harris's race? Is there a strategy here?
Let me pause before she comments, and I just want to say something. I posted a video earlier today, two of them actually, that were not a part of a live stream. The Kamala Harris border story and the Trump-Elon conversation last night. So I posted those as separate clips today, which you'll see me do quite a bit throughout this election season, just because news breaks like every day. It's crazy. So I can't always wait for a live stream. Sometimes I just need to cover that one story and just upload that clip. But something that I noticed, and I called this out in the discussion that Trump had with Elon Musk as well, Donald Trump needs to stop going around telling people that Kamala Harris dislikes Jewish people. He needs to stop telling people that she dislikes Israel. It is very obvious that she's taking money from AIPAC. We've talked about this before over and over on this show. We've played videos where she's given statements and speeches at AIPAC saying that she will, Israel has a right to defend itself and she has unwavering support for Israel. So he needs to stop with Israel with Kamala Harris, because that is obviously debunkable. Okay. At that point, you're just trying to come up with stuff to try to get people to turn away from her. And my thing is, again, like I said before, if you really want to attack Kamala Harris politically, you need to focus on her record, which he is not doing. Now, let's get to this conversation because there's some stuff to say.
I don't know if there's a strategy. We know that Donald Trump is very driven by his impulses. We know that his impulses often lead him to say things that make people want to pull their hair out and go, can you believe this guy was our president, might be our president again? And I'm so used to hearing these things and getting asked, like, will this affect the race? And I'm used to thinking, no, it probably won't. But in a race that is going to be as close as this one, maybe in a race where it feels like nothing matters, everything matters. I mean, there's a chance that what he's trying to do here is drive the message that she's phony. She's changed her positions on X, Y, and Z. She tries to be whoever she thinks she needs to be in the moment. But frankly, with his numbers growing the way they were among Black men in particular, to go and be kind of openly weird and hostile about the race issue seems totally counterproductive to me.
Whether he just slipped in this by impulse or intended to do it after raising the race issue at the reporters' conference, Trump posted an old video of Harris and actress Mindy Kaling cooking together.
Okay, so what we're going to cook today is an Indian recipe.
Yes.
Because you are Indian.
Yes.
Okay, and I don't know that everybody knows that.
Now, Trump claimed this proves Harris is a stone-cold phony. She uses everybody, including her racial identity. Kara?
Let me pause here for just a second because I saw that conversation that she had with Mindy King. So here's the thing. Some people saw that video and they said, oh, well, she's biracial. So she claimed one side and not the other. This is not uncommon, etc. Not from my experience, because this is another thing that people have to understand. I have biracial people in my family. Okay. I went to school overseas. I went to Dodge school. So I went to school with everybody, especially in the military community. A lot of people, at least it wasn't then. I don't know what's going on in the military now. But at that point in time, it wasn't uncommon to have friends that had parents that were in an interracial relationship. So what I'm trying to tell you is this. None of my friends and none of my family members that were biracial only claimed one side of their race. I never heard any of my friends say this conversation here with Mindy, where she said, Mindy's telling her, oh, you're Indian. And Kamala goes, yes, yes. Kamala doesn't correct her and say that she's Indian and she's also Jamaican. She doesn't do. In fact, I've seen her do this a couple of times. I saw her do it with the reporter when she was about to win the Senate seat, or they were waiting to find out if she was going to win. And they said to her, if you win, this is on video. If you win, you will be the first Indian senator. And Kamala Harris said yes. She didn't correct the reporter and say, well, Indian and Jamaican. So this is why, and it's not just Donald Trump. We'll get into where other Black people have pointed this out. It's not just Donald Trump, but this is where it comes from. Because when people see that you're not willing to claim that other side, or you're only willing to claim that other side when it is beneficial for you, people are going to look at you and call you fake and phony. And that's basically what he's doing. And Donald Trump is not the first person to do that. Black people were doing that first. Black people were calling Kamala Harris out about this first because it was true. It was whoever she was around at that point in time. It seemed like that's what she was. And there's video for this. So this is not about how everybody else is handling this situation. This is specifically about Kamala Harris and how she handles this situation. Let's continue.
What's going on here?
Well, you didn't play all of it. And in that clip, she also says, half of me understands this, which she was talking about being Indian and also Black. And so he keeps Grandpa had a bad week. I don't know what else to say. I don't know why he does this. I don't know why he keeps focusing on race. If he wants to talk about her policy flip-flops, he should talk about her policy and not, that's where he would do better.
But I've said that too. And that's another thing I've added, that he needs to focus on her record, really, because that's how Tulsi Gabbard really nailed Kamala Harris, when she focused on Kamala Harris's record. That's what you really need to be focusing on. That being said, what I did not like that this panel did is because, at least at the start of the panel, we'll get to the rest, they tried to make it seem like he was the one that started this. He did not start this. Donald Trump was not the first person to call out Kamala like basically being phony. Black people were doing it first. Does everybody understand this? Black people were doing it first. But liberal media would have you believe that is not the case. So what is Donald Trump trying to do? This is what you really need to ask yourself. What he's trying to do is he's seen the things that Black people have said about Kamala Harris. And don't forget, he has people that are a part, in his space that are Republicans, that are Black Republicans, and they've seen some of these statements too. So Donald Trump is trying to use those statements himself and use it against Kamala Harris in order to try to find a way to gain Black supporters for his campaign. That's a strategy, part of a strategy that he's been trying to use. Now, obviously, it is not working out well for him. He's getting a lot of criticism for doing it. And Black people who say those things as well also get criticism for doing it, but they don't get criticized as heavily as Donald Trump does. Let's continue.
Take this argument, she's phony, she's fake, she flips. She was Indian American. Now she's black.
But she wasn't. It
I
wasn't
understand,
true.
but to make that argument.
No, I don't think it's a good argument. I think that it's a good argument if you want to argue about fracking or if you want to argue about immigration or anything else. But this makes no sense. I don't even understand it.
As Kristen mentioned, Trump has been making a major push to win black voters, especially young black males. In a recent poll, Harris leads among black voters 78% to 15%, but that's still closer than how Trump ran against Biden back in 2020.
And what I think a lot of people don't want to admit to is that Donald Trump did not have 15% support among the black community in 2020 or 2016. The number has increased over the years. Now, we expect the Democrat candidate to have higher support with the black community because the majority of black voters vote for the Democratic Party. So we expect that to happen. However, we do not expect the Republican candidate to continue to increase support with the black community, and that has been happening.
Lulu, does questioning Harris's race kill Trump's outreach to black voters?
It is ridiculous. And not only is it ridiculous, but, you know, he seems to not understand the concept of being biracial. And frankly, it is the largest growing group among young people in this country. America understands what it means to be biracial. The fact that Donald Trump doesn't seem to understand this makes him look incredibly out of touch, not only offensive and not only racially insensitive.
Let me just pause here for a second. This woman here, her name is Lula Garcia. Okay. Lula Garcia, she is Cuban and Panamanian, right? But you could probably look at her and say, okay, well, actually, she could kind of pass, you know, like if you don't see her name, especially, she could kind of pass, that kind of thing. But it's not just, I don't think this is just about being biracial, right? I think this is about Kamala Harris choosing to flip flop when it suits her best. And it's not just about her race. She's done it on fracking. She's done it on healthcare. She's doing it right now on the border. Depending on who she's around and who's in the room, she tends to flip on these issues. So these are the kind of things that I've seen. We just talked about this earlier today with Ahmad, who was here, who was talking about the things that she said to protesters behind closed doors versus what she said to protesters in front of everybody else versus what she's saying from her campaign when she's putting out information on Twitter. There are three different statements, but you're talking about the same topic. So I think the point that he was trying to do is to show to people that she flip flops to fit the situation that is presented in front of her.
Not only offensive and not only racially insensitive.
Ryan?
So I don't think this is necessarily a good thing. But what I will say is that for a lot of Americans, particularly a lot of Black Americans, there is some sense of discomfort about the fact that when you look at high profile, high status, successful Black Americans, many of them are themselves multiracial, first or second generation Americans, immigrants or kids of immigrants, or they're themselves intermarried. There are some folks, there's a group called the American Descendants of Slaves, ADOS, a kind of emerging movement that you see in some spaces where people say, hey, wait a second, you have folks who are not part of this multi-generational, long Black American story who are claiming this mantle.
Before she jumps in, let's go back to the thing about the skin color, because this is important, right? Because this goes back to colorism. So listen to this part.
So I don't think this is necessarily a good thing. But what I will say is that for a lot of Americans, particularly a lot of Black Americans, there is some sense of discomfort about the fact that when you look at high profile, high status, successful Black Americans, many of them are themselves multiracial, first or second generation Americans, immigrants or kids of immigrants, or they're themselves intermarried.
Or they have lighter skin altogether. So this is something I noticed when I was growing up, when I was a kid, right? This is back in the day, so walk with me for just a second. When I was a kid, I noticed when I looked at the front cover of magazines, now people don't really buy them, I guess, that much anymore. But I remember when I did see a Black model on the cover of a magazine, it was usually someone that was biracial or someone that was light skinned. with the exception was Naomi Campbell. Naomi Campbell was the exception, right? But even Naomi Campbell was an American, right? So when you saw someone like Tyra Banks, it was like, whoa, wow, like one of us really made it, right? But even Tyra was light skinned. And don't let this ring light fool you, okay? Everybody like, oh, Sabby, you're like, no, I'm not. I'm not light skinned. That is the lighting. Very different. But these are the things that I saw when I was growing up as a kid. That's typically how it was. It was the lighter skinned women were on the cover of the magazines, and that lasted for quite some time. And every now and then you would have like that one, darker skinned person that was there. Now we fast forward and we go to positions of power. We had the first Black president. It was Barack Obama. Barack Obama was biracial, right? If you look at a lot of these positions where people are higher up, where they tend to get pretty far, he's right about what he's saying there, that it's usually, particularly in this country, it's like they're either lighter skin, so there's a colorism factor, or they are internationals, or they immigrated to the United States. Those people are seen in a different light than people like me. And so when he gets into the ADOS conversation, I can go a little bit deeper about that, because I think what sometimes people just don't understand, especially if you live in a place like I live in the Boston area, it's an international hub. A lot of times what people don't realize is that people like me, when I first came here, it was very tough for me because I'm not a part of the community. So I can go to Dorchester, I can go to Roxbury, I can go to Mattapan, and people may have the same complexion as me, but they don't consider me to be one of them because I'm a Black American. We'll get into that a little bit more, but he's right about that. He has a point. Let's continue.
There are some folks, there's a group called the American Descendants of Slaves, ADOS, a kind of emerging movement that you see in some spaces where people say, hey, wait a second, you have folks who are not part of this multi-generational, long Black American story who are claiming this mantle. I'm not saying that's necessarily a good thing, Lulu.
I'm just shocked that this is an argument that you are putting forward.
This is something I'm talking about as an analyst to describe the fact that the Black community is not a monolith. There are a lot of complicated, conflicted feelings. More than twice.
Let me pause for a second. She doesn't want to hear this. You know why she doesn't want to hear it? Because for her, I told you she's Cuban and Panamanian, but she's white adjacent. For her, when she looks at all of us that are a part of the diaspora, she just sees Black because she's looking at the skin color. She doesn't stop and think that we don't have the same culture. She doesn't stop and think that a lot of times we don't even live in the same neighborhoods. There are certain neighborhoods that you can come to here in Boston that are Haitian, that are Jamaican, that are Dominican, West Indian. Same thing if you go to certain parts of New York. So in her mind, she thinks that when she looks at the diaspora, we're all Black to her. And honestly, a lot of white people think this. They just look at the skin color. They think, oh, we're all the same. We have a very different culture. And people need to understand that. And I think a lot of times they don't get that. So what he's trying to explain something to her, he's trying to educate her, and she's ready to shut him down because she doesn't want to hear it, because to her, we are all Black. Now, think about something for a second. Imagine if, because we know there's different ethnicities and all that jazz, right? Black American is an ethnic group. Imagine when Americans see someone that's Asian and they assume they're Chinese. Why does that happen? As if they can't be Korean, as if they can't be Vietnamese. One of my students told me that a couple years ago. They said, why in America everybody assume we're all Chinese? Just stuff like that, But just think about that for a second. People are quick to correct you. And I'm here to let you know, some of the folks that are a part of the diaspora have been very quick to correct me. They've been very quick to tell me I'm not Black, I'm Dominican. They've been very quick to tell me I'm not Jamaican, I'm Black. They've been very quick to tell me I'm not Black, I'm Cape Verdean. Very quick to tell me that. And that's throughout my entire life. So this is what I think people like her just don't understand. Let's continue.
Twice as many Black Americans oppose intermarriage as white Americans.
Skin color is black, you're black. It is a completely ridiculous.
See, did you hear what she just said? Did you hear what she just said? She just looks at the skin color. She thinks we're all the same.
Argument that you are putting forward.
This is something I'm talking about as an analyst to describe the fact that the Black community is not a monolith. There are a lot of complicated, conflicted feelings. More than twice as many Black Americans oppose intermarriage as white Americans.
Skin color is black, you're black. It is
Did you hear that? If your skin color is black, you are black. And that is why she thinks that. You see that? Like I said, so to her logic, if she meant someone that was Dominican that had darker skin, and there are, for example, in Boston, a lot of people that are Dominican have darker skin. She would just tell them, if your skin is black, you're black. They'll be very quick to let you know, no, I'm not. I'm Dominican. You see the problem with what she just said? But that's how they see us. Ay.
Completely ridiculous argument to be made in a country where you had the one drop, where you had the one drop rule, where you were actually penalized legally in this country if you had a single drop of black blood. To now say that this woman who is clearly black is somehow suspicious and is wearing a mantle and trying to assume some kind of.
He's saying that she is not. Thank you, Deneen. What if someone called her Mexican? Would she correct them? Exactly. This is what I'm talking about. But again, we can't have different culture. Do you see what I mean? When they look at the diaspora, they don't see, they just all say, oh, your skin's black, you're black. But everybody else has different ethnic groups. We have different ethnic groups as well. So Black American is an ethnic group. And I'm going to break that down for you after this clip to show you what that means. And that's what pissed me off when she said that, as to like, we don't have differences. We do have cultural differences. Jeez Louise.
I'm describing public opinion. I'm describing the fact that this current does exist. And I think that when we're trying to understand the electorate,
let Raihan talk.
I think it's important to understand that this is one of those cleavages. I do not think that it was a good thing for Donald Trump to use this line of attack. I agree with Kara. Stick to policy.
This is not what Donald Trump. This is not what Donald Trump was doing. You are trying to explain something. If you ask Donald Trump, if you ask Donald Trump, what were you up to, Mr. Trump? He's not going to be like, you know, that there's this current in the African American community that talks about the descendants of slavery. Do you think that that is what he was up to? He was going there in order to do what he always does, which is to throw as much as he can against the wall and to see what
I'm afraid part of what I'm trying to do is actually try to give some insight into the fact that public opinion is changing, it's divided, and there's a big conversation about this. I don't think that this is the best angle to pursue, but I do think that when you're talking about the Black community, he's not looking to win 90% of the Black vote. He's looking at what are interesting cleavages and divides within that population, and this is one of them.
In addition to all that, there was the very explicit.
Yeah, so I think that's a very important point that he made there. A very important point. And I think, you know, what was really sad to me was for her to sit up there and to try to tell him, I think he's Black and Arab, I believe. But her to sit up there and try to tell him what is Black when she's not Black. That's the thing that killed me. I don't sit up there and try to tell you, you know, who's Cuban and who's not and all that kind of stuff. I don't go into all of that. But notice how, once again, this is the thing that I was talking about before, where other people who are not a part of that group at all try to come in and tell you what your group is. And we've seen this happen before, right? She was giving me kind of Karen vibes. That's the kind of radar that she was giving me. But we need to talk about that again. What does it mean to be Black American? And I want to break this down because I think people fully do not understand. There is an author, her name is Deborah Dickerson. Deborah Dickerson talked about this during the Obama days. She wrote an article in Salon. She's also written many books called Colorblind, right? Now I want to just jump down to this part here to make sure I get to the right part. And she talks about Al Sharpton in here too. It was really funny. Let me go here. Okay. This part right here. Believe I'm at the right part. Sorry, guys. I'm just making sure. Here we go. I'll go so far as to say that a white woman will be the Democratic nominee for president before a Black descendant of American slaves. We need to highlight this part right here. Even if Obama invokes slavery and Jim Crow, he does so as one who stands outside, one who emotes but still merely informs, one who can be respectfully tolerated because there's a limit to how far he can go in invoking history. Let's jump down here. To say that Obama isn't Black is merely to say, by virtue of his white American mom and his Kenyan dad, who abandoned both him and America, he is an American of African immigrant extraction. It is also to point out that the continuing significance of the slave experience to the white American psyche, it's not we who can't get over it. It's you lumping us together, which Blacks also do from sloppiness and ignorance, and as a way to dominate the race issue and to force immigrants of African descent to subordinate their preferences to ours, erases the significance of slavery and continuing racism while giving the appearance of progress, though actually it is a kind of progress. And that's why I break my silence. Obama with his non-Black ass is doing us a favor. So this article, she did some pros and cons about Obama. But the point that Deborah is driving home, and she's talked about this multiple times, and she wrote a book about this. People have to understand there is a difference. Black Americans are an ethnic group. Black Americans are those that are descendants from American slavery. Those are Black Americans. So when people say that Kamala Harris is not Black, they're not talking about the color of her skin. They're talking about the Black American ethnic group. And I don't know, maybe people should frame it that way. Because I think when a lot of people hear she's not Black, they're like, what are you talking about? Her skin is obviously, but that's not what they're saying. What they're saying is she's not a Black American because it is a particular ethnic group. Just like you can't look at me and call me Jamaican. That is an ethnic group that I am not a part of. You can't look at me and call me Dominican. That is an ethnic group that I am not a part of, but I am a Black American. That's what I want people to understand. And that's what they're trying to say. They're not saying her skin color isn't such and such. They're saying that she is not an American descendant of slavery. Thus, she is not a Black American, which is a particular ethnic group. Does everybody understand that? I want that. I want to educate people here. Now, this is not to say that you get angry with someone because they're not a part of that group. No, don't go doing that. Don't go fighting with people and telling people and calling people names and all that. I'm not down for all that. Don't go doing none of that. But there is a difference. And just like you don't lump other ethnic groups together and say they're all Chinese or they're all Vietnamese, you don't do that with us either. That's the point that I'm trying to make. And people need to understand it. What killed me in that conversation was the woman who is not Jamaican, who is not Indian, who is not a Black American, was trying to tell everybody else who's Black and who's not. So there's that. Oh my God. Jesus Christ. And you notice what kills me? One thing about this panel, one more thing to say, sorry. I noticed they did not have, when they're talking about this discussion about Black Americans, they didn't have one ADOS person on that panel. And that doesn't mean it needs to be someone who is a part of the organization ADOS, but they didn't have one person on that panel that is a American descendant of slavery. Wow. Ay, ay, ay. Some people hear this and they get mad. Sabby loves everybody. Sabby comes from a multicultural, multiracial family. I love everybody. That being said, we got to get some things straight. We got to get some things straight, because I done seen a number of white commentators try to say the same thing, that she's black and da-da-da-da, obviously, da-da, look at her skin, blah, blah. Again, white people trying to tell me who's black and who's not. Now do you see why I started the show? There was a space that needed to be filled.